This podcast contains explicit content and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Don't say we didn't warn you.
Hello and welcome. My name is Madison.
And I'm Hanna,
And you are listening to Who's Knocking?
a true crime podcast.
Hello. So here we are, a new episode. This one is going to be a multi-parter. Not sure how many parts yet, but it's going to be fun. And yeah, here we are. What's up, Hannah?
Not too much.
Yeah.
Hanging out, getting ready to be scared.
Yeah, this episode, I don't think it'll be scary. This is going to be the most tame.
It's not going to be as bad as the crime scene photos on Reddit.
Oh God, no, not at all.
Nothing could be.
Nothing could compare to the Jeffrey Dahmer crime scene photos that I.
Oh, that's not even the worst one
with my
for me.
bare eyes.
Yeah, that one's pretty bad, but some of the others are kind of worse.
Yeah. What's going on in true crime right now? This might be a little bit late compared to when it actually happened, because we're like a couple weeks behind in our episodes. But there was that guy who was allegedly one of Epstein's accomplices, or I don't know what you would call him.
Oh yeah, I think I heard about that. The modeling scout.
Yes, the modeling scout who committed suicide in jail. Perhaps he was suicided. I don't know. I haven't read any theories on that one.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody thinks he committed suicide, but maybe he did. I don't know.
It's possible. I don't know if you can hear my child screaming apple in the background repeatedly, but if you do.
Oh no, is it the child that's recently learning to talk?
Yeah.
Well, good for him for learning words.
Kind of happy about it. He's just started to say apple instead of pulpul, but
it's so cute.
Be quiet.
But also not right now.
Yeah. Hopefully that'll just die out. Not just like quiet.
Yeah, I know.
And another recent thing, which I think we are really looking at doing possibly another little follow-up about, is that so the Adam Strong episode that we did,
yes,
that has been our like most popular YouTube video. It hasn't really gone crazy in the podcasting apps compared to other ones, but it's definitely done the best on YouTube by quite a large margin. And for anybody who's seen that, or maybe you found us based on that video, there is an update in the case, and I'll just like very quickly go over the
and for people that don't know, it's a local case to us.
Yeah, it happened in Oshawa, which we're basically Toronto based or whatever. That's what I'll say that we are. And Oshawa is just outside of Toronto. It's not super far. I actually drove by this weekend.
Yeah.
And the second girl whose blood they found, who was actually the first victim, her body was found.
Right.
And
wasn't it because he decided to admit that information?
Yes, that's what we know.
We think it's just because he needs attention, and so this is like the only way he can get attention.
Yeah, I think he likes talking to people, but also I do think that it's very possible that he was getting smaller perks than because I think they're saying like he didn't get any like reduced time.
That's what I'm saying. Like he decided that he needs to, either get his name out there more, or maybe he wants something, and that's why he's admitting this information now.
Yeah, and like that is within the case, those are all the cards he really has. So like if he's gonna keep talking, and hopefully he does, poor people who have to sit there in the same room and listen to him talk. That's another story. Gross. But I think there's a lot of people who think that these were not the only two people that he murdered.
Right.
I think that's a strong possibility. And so
I don't see why not.
I would definitely theorize that it's possible that he starts admitting to other things, because they can't like keep him in prison any longer. He's got a essentially got a
Yeah.
life sentence. So there's not much more they can do to him.
Right.
And that man loves to fucking talk.
I know. Nobody wants to talk to him, so.
So keep your eye out on that. I know that I think it's, we only got a little bit of information, but hopefully more information will come. It doesn't seem like he's going to get any more added to his sentence. He did get a
Can he?
sentence. Yeah, they could. I don't, at the end of the day, it's not going to do anything, I don't think. But like he got life for Rory, but he only got, I think, something around 17 years for Candace because they couldn't.
Right, but it just wouldn't make a difference because he's already going to be in jail for life.
Yeah, and I mean,
as he should be.
He's got life without the possibility of parole for 25 years. But I don't know, but I know that there was talk about him getting a dangerous offender designation, which would essentially put him in prison for life. But I think it could.
Dear God, I hope he doesn't get parole.
Yeah, what I would hope, the difference could be like, how in like with Paul Bernardo, he's up for parole every 2 years.
Yeah.
Which I would assume is the same for Adam, but they were talking about maybe extending Paul's to like once every 7 years or something. Maybe they could do something like that for Adam. And I really don't know how that section of the law works.
Right.
That would be a good thing to add if you're going to add something. Like you can only go up for parole every 10 years or something.
Is that an option?
I have no idea.
Or that okay.
I know that for Paul, for example, it's every 2 years. And I know that there's talk about trying to
they don't want
because who wants to deal with
the
that
victims'
every 2
families?
years?
Yeah.
It's like no one.
Yeah, and also fuck. Yeah, literally go fuck yourself. Like no.
Exactly. So if Adam Strong gets to go up for parole every 2 years, like why don't we throw you every 15 years or whatever?
Right.
I don't know. But yeah, those are some things going on, and they're interesting. So I think we should get into it. I think there's something going on. So today's episode is, a lot of people might be familiar with this. It's about a man named Charles Sobhraj. I'm gonna pronounce it Sobraj. That's what I'm gonna go with. This is the spelling, if you can see and you're watching on YouTube.
You've told me a little bit about him, or about this case. I don't really know that much about it though.
Yeah, and that's good. I think most people, if you know about him, there was a very popular series on Netflix that happened in the last 2 years or so.
Okay.
I watched it. I really enjoyed it. One thing that some people...
What was it called?
It's called The Serpent. And it's based on this book, which I'll introduce in a moment. It's a really good series, I thought. One problem, I am not a native French speaker. My husband speaks French and his mother is a native French speaker, and he was very appalled by the main girl's French accent. So
oh, really?
For people who are like, that's not a real accent, like, that's bothersome. But other than that, I thought it was really good, and I didn't notice because I can't tell.
Same.
But it's a fascinating story. It's quite gruesome. It's interesting, I think, because it's one of those stories where like the killer is such a prominent figure, and a lot of the victims are tourists in the 70s, and it's like hippie era people who just like, you don't really get to know much about them. So you don't, I think it's one of those stories where you kind of, the victims kind of get looked over a little bit and it doesn't seem as bad as it is. But then when you really start to look into it and you really start to see what happened to these people, and a lot of the murders were really gruesome, and like, people being burned alive, and I don't know. I don't know if they're burned alive. I don't know if they're burned alive, but just dying in pretty horrific ways. It's you're like, oh shit, no, that was bad. And the amount of victims is pretty high as well. But he is also, I don't like to say it in a nice way, but he's a very fascinating person. And And also we're now in the era where like the Tinder swindler is a big thing. I don't know if you've seen that documentary, but it's like basically a big scammer. And he is a very like scammy individual. And
Right.
it's fascinating to see how people can just like slither and slime and get
Ooh.
around everything. So I'll just say the bulk of my research came from this book. It is called, I'll just read, The Trial of the Serpent, The Life and Crimes of Charles Sobhraj. This is what the series is based on, and it's basically like two kind of journalist people who studied his whole life and documented everything. And it's quite good so far. This episode we will go through mainly his like childhood and the lead up. Like there's a lot, we know a lot about his childhood, a lot. So I think both of us are particularly interested in that kind of stuff. It really lays the foundation so that you can like later see what he did and be like, oh, that's where that came from. And
yeah, definitely.
So this is definitely, it's not going to be the most like horrifying episode at all.
Okay, got it.
But it's fascinating in my opinion.
Cool.
And in terms of a rating, I don't find this, I mean, if I was like a young girl traveling Asia in the 70s, it would be a pretty scary thing. He like really preyed on and figured out these people. I'm going to put it at a 5.
Okay.
No, I'm going to put it at a 6. I'm going to say 6. It's a fucking serial killer.
Yeah. And that could have been you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I did not go traveling throughout Asia, but I could have, and it could have been anything, So this is a story of Charles Sobhraj, aka the Bikini Killer.
Oh, okay.
Now, and I'll just say too, so reading this book and then like seeing a lot of other sources and stuff, I've seen a lot of conflicting stuff. I'm gonna use the names that I have found, that his parents' names and all the names, as much as I can, they're the real names of people, but a lot of people have like pseudonyms and stuff. Hopefully they're the right names. It's kind of hard to tell.
Right.
But here we go. So Charles Sobhraj was born on April 6th, 1944. His mother, Tran Lon Fung, was 20 years old. She was a beautiful woman from a small village in Vietnam. Her parents had both died in World War II, and so she was left on her own, and she decided to pick up and move to the big city of Saigon. And now this is all, I'll just say too, this is all kind of, we go through a lot of different countries, and it's all kind of backdropped on like some very interesting history, which I'm going to attempt to also explain. But again, I'm sure there will be corrections about that if people are like super big history buffs, but we shall see. So when she moved to Saigon, she found work at a men's clothing store and tailoring store kind of thing. And she did very well there, and she worked her way up to a higher position, and she eventually caught the eye of her boss. Her boss was an Indian man named Hochand Sobraj. Hochand, I'm going to like all these pronunciations too. Like this is just a guess. I don't fucking know. But Hochand was a wealthy Indian businessman. He owned 2 tailor shops, and he was also a moneylender. Now, apparently at the time, Indian people were treated quite poorly in Vietnam. And this seemed to be what their theory was, and that seemed to be the thing at the time, was that they were a kind of a resented group of people because of their wide success in the money lending business. And so Hochand was like specifically working in money lending. So he was super, super successful and did really well. Excuse me. But there was definitely some like racism or resentment and at the time. But also there was a lot of things going on. So Tran became his mistress, and then she also became pregnant. And so she gave birth to Charles. And Charles's original birth name was, I'm going to butcher this, but Hatchend Payani Gurumuk Charles Sobhraj. And I guess the beginning of that was a very traditional Indian name. And Charles would have kind of many names before eventually being christened later in life as Charles. And I'm just going to call him Charles because that's what he ends up as, just for ease. But he did start
Fair enough.
as Gurumuk.
Okay.
Now, at the time of Charles's birth, Saigon was in a pretty violent state. And I believe at the time it was also called Indochina. It was the territory was being fought over by a lot of people at the time. Okay. That's the easiest way to say that. But so the Viet Minh, who was a national independence coalition established by the Indo-Chinese Communist Party to form a united front in Vietnam, they had relaunched their guerrilla campaign against the Japanese occupation forces that were currently occupying Vietnam. And it was very intense, a lot of general violence, a lot of bombs going off all the time. It's essentially a bit of a war zone. And right. When Charles was only 1 year old, he and his mother were actually kidnapped for ransom. Their kidnappers came from another gang called the Binsin. I looked up how to pronounce that, and apparently that's basically how you pronounce it. Does not look like that's how you pronounce it, but that's what I'm going with.
That's scary, though.
Yeah, it's horrifying. Yeah. It's very, there's a lot of stories of people being like kidnapped in Mexico for ransom, or like in South America these days. It's like a very common thing. And like when you go to certain places, you get like insurance for that kind of thing, because it's literally, you have to pay them and then they'll let you go. Right. But this is clearly a tactic being used by this specific gang. And they had allied themselves with the Viet Minh, and they would, as I was just saying, they would often run these schemes just to make money. And thankfully, Ho Chi had connections with the Japanese, who then ambushed the kidnappers when they came for the ransom money. And they were able to get Tran and Charles back and not have to give any ransom money. But still terrifying as a mother with a 1-year-old baby to be kidnapped.
For sure.
I would shit my pants. But on August 15th, 1945, the Japanese surrendered and left. And the Viet Minh briefly took over until 3 weeks later, when the British arrived. They violently cleared out the city of the Viet Minh, and the Viet Minh tried to fight back, creating even further violence. So baby Charles was living in a time where he was often woken in the night by sounds of bombs. And what Tran would do when this was happening was she would like wrap him up and in a blanket and then hide him under a wardrobe all night until morning. And that just sounds terrifying. I don't know how you get a baby to sit under a wardrobe for like 8 hours. 1-year-old babies do not tend to cooperate. So that just sounds like absolute chaos to me.
Yeah.
So that's how things were at that time. And then when Charles was 3 years old, Tran became pregnant again. And also during that time, Hachin came home from a trip to India with some news. He had entered an arranged marriage with an Indian woman.
What the hell?
Yeah, you'll find out he's not the nicest.
Yeah, seems like kind of a dick.
Yeah, but it's like Tran was always described as his mistress. It didn't.
But that's him being a dick.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying, like, I think this wasn't like, I don't know if he was seeing someone
or
else,
like she knew what the arrangement was.
She knew she was a mistress, but then maybe she was like, well, I'm pregnant now. Like, but anyway, he was like, no, it's just a formality. Like, my family made me do it. Don't worry about it. Like, you guys can still stay in this fancy apartment. But she was like, fuck no. And she packed up her stuff and she peaced out. And that's when their relationship officially ended. And so I was like,
fair.
Like, go Tran. Like, that's this is, I don't think
mean,
that was
yeah.
like a very common thing. Like you'll see in his life down the road, like he's got like all these other women, and I don't think he was expecting her to just be like, okay, bye. But she did, and I admire that.
Yeah.
So it was not long before Tran met a man named Alphonse Devereaux. I believe this is his name. His name is actually kind of difficult to find online, and the book has him as a pseudonym. They have him
Right.
being called Jacques, but I will call him. What did I just say his name was?
Alphonse Devereaux.
Alphonse. I'm going to call him Alphonse. So she met Alphonse, and he was an adjunct surgeon from Bordeaux. And so he
What kind of surgeon?
An adjutant.
What is that?
This I looked up. Did I find that it was? But he was essentially a French soldier. And I think he was like doing regular stuff for a while, but then he was mostly like an administrative person. And
okay,
adjutant, that's how it's spelled, but it seems like it's spelled wrong. But it's a military appointment given to an officer who assists the commanding officer with unit administration.
Okay.
And that's all it says he ever was, but I kind of think that he did a little bit more, because later he seems very affected by the war, and maybe that's just what he was like seeing these things, even though he was just doing administrative work. It's kind of unclear, but that's what he was at the time when she met him. And they got married, and so it was like the French came and started helping the British at some point. So the French were also occupying Saigon. So that's how she met him. And they got married in 1948, and he formally adopted Charles's baby sister Nicole at the wedding. Not Charles, though. Charles did not get adopted.
Why not Charles?
It didn't explain, but I'm assuming because they were still living in Saigon, and like his dad was there. So I think his dad might have had to like agree with that or something. And like he had a relationship with his father at the time, kind of. Okay. But the sister like never even met the dad. The sister was technically the daughter of Hochland, but like I don't think she ever even met him.
Okay.
So but pretty much, and like at the wedding, or like when they met, Tran met Alphonse when she was still pregnant. So he was like the dad from day one. And I think Hochland got it. Really give a shit. He doesn't seem to care much.
Yeah.
About his children.
Right.
So Charles did not get adopted, and Nicole did. At age 4, Charles's difficult behavior, and so I'll also just say the book really, I think, puts Alphonse in a pretty good light. Like, it doesn't really say that he ever did anything like bad to Charles, or like he treated him well. But in other sources, some of the writing leads me to believe that he like kind of resented this child that was not his, kind of thing, and then that was a piece of it. So it's kind of hard to know. But I feel like these people spent a lot of time figuring out the main relationship. So it's all based on like what people have said after the fact. So it's really hard to know for sure. Yeah. But we'll go forward with that in mind. So at age 4, Charles's difficult behavior began. Oh. His new home was far less luxurious than his home with his rich father, and he missed his real dad, and he did not bond with Alphonse at all. Although Alphonse did allegedly try. Okay, cool. Yeah. Alphonse was a hardworking military guy, but he was super soft and he never yelled, which was very different from Charles's real dad. Charles's real dad was he was a very hard man, and like they were opposites essentially. And you'd think too, because Alphonse was like a military guy, but he was like with his children and with his family, he was like very soft spoken and not like no temper, so to speak of, which I think we'll see that Charles like just did not end up respecting.
Oh,
I think it's clear that Charles could have used a tougher hand, maybe.
interesting.
But Alphonse ended up getting posted back in Marseille. And at this time, which is in France, and at this time, Tran decided that she and Nicole would go with him, but she sent Charles to live with his father in Saigon. During this time in France, Tran had 2 more children, Jean Daniel and Guy. And after a few years, Alphonse, and now also, I don't think that the names of all these kids are actually their names, but I'm just going to go with the pseudonyms. We don't need to bring other kids into this and whatever, but
fair.
you know. And then after a few years, Alphonse was ordered to go back to Saigon, and Charles was 7 by then. And so the whole family moved back with him. Tran then went to see Charles and found that Hotchin's new wife, who had taken over their old home, had pretty much left Charles to join the street children. And she just didn't want him around because she didn't want the reminder of her husband's former lover hanging around in her new home.
It's a child.
Yeah, the 7-year-old kid who just had nothing to do with the relationship.
Yeah.
But it seemed that Charles like really thrived with the street kids and like loved it. He was 7, so like he didn't really know any different. The street kids there were like super adventurous, and they were like adapted very well to their circumstances, and they like ran these little gangs and like ran these little schemes, and like they were like, they made it sound like they were like really cool.
Yeah, that actually sounds fun. Yeah.
It's possible that like maybe they didn't have enough to eat, and like they were basically living in a war zone, so I'm sure it was dangerous. Right. But it was like a little rat pack, you know.
No.
But yeah, Tran was pretty horrified when she saw that, and she couldn't believe that she had sent Charles to live with his super wealthy father, and he just essentially let him be a homeless child.
Right.
She did that with the intention of like giving him a good life and like letting him be with his dad, and like hoping that he would like have like a nicer upbringing or like a nicer environment than otherwise, but it was the opposite.
Right.
So Saigon was still super violent as the Viet Minh were trying to gain control over the British and the French. And Charles immediately began hating being back with Tran and Alphonse.
I feel like that's got to be rough.
Yes. And this is where like a lot of the underlying daddy issue type stuff will emerge.
Yeah. I mean, he's already had such a like unstable and uprooted childhood from the beginning.
Yeah, and it doesn't get better. But it's interesting too, because I feel like you'll see as we go, there's like a lot more travel and back and forth, and I think a lot of kids can take that in stride and like, and it can be like a cool thing, and then some kids not. Like my Chris and his siblings, like his parents traveled a lot when they were younger. But
I think it's more so the fact that he's being like swapped among different homes and different like social environments.
It's the dad stuff for sure.
Yeah.
And the war zone probably. That can't leave a good. I can't do anything good for you.
Yeah, I can't imagine that it would.
But yeah, yeah, I think like it's interesting because I think the sister Nicole turns out to like be super well adjusted and
very interesting.
That like it's
not. I always wonder about
like later down the road we'll see like she's like has a normal life, and
like I always wonder what happened to Paul Bernardo's brother and sister.
Yeah. Well, I think in Charles's case, he has a lot more siblings that will come up. And I think one of them ends up later getting involved in some of this, but the rest, I don't think, to my knowledge. At least some of them turned out fine.
Okay.
But yeah, so the biggest problem that Charles had was that he did not respect Alphonse at all and thought he was a very weak man. And immediately he started sneaking out at night and running away to be at his father's home. Although it was clear he wasn't really wanted over there, and he would
always sad.
Yeah, that's the saddest part. Um,
Like his dad just rejecting him.
yeah. And
It's never good.
It's really sad. I can't imagine. He would just always be returned the next day by his dad's servants.
Oh, come on.
And Tran didn't know what to do to keep him from running away. So she resorted to locking him in the bathroom whenever she had to go out. Not the healthiest.
That seems like what you would do with a dog, but okay.
Yeah, I would never lock my child in the bathroom. And if I did, they would have so much fun in there and destroy everything. But
yeah.
So when that didn't work, she then so whenever she did that, he would always find a way to escape. So this was a very savvy child. So then Tran started tying him to his bed.
Come on, really?
Yes, but he always got out of those restraints. And then one day she did tie him down well enough so that he couldn't escape, and she left him there for multiple days.
Come on.
Which is pretty fucked up.
Yeah, that's really bad.
What
kind of parents are these, honestly?
Now, the thing with the parents, especially the Tran and Alphonse, I think they definitely made some large mistakes. I think all parents make mistakes. I think
tying your kid down on a bed for days, though.
Yeah, I think that's like a really bad thing to do.
Yeah. Like what the fuck is that?
But I think it's also really hard to, as in the entirety of their parenting, which I think had some major mistakes, whatever, but like they were literally living in war zones.
Right.
So it's like I can't apply my own parenting standards to them. I just don't think it makes sense. And I have no idea what it's like to live in such a violent environment with multiple children, yada, yada, yada. Right. Everyone else can be the judge of that. It's interesting to talk about. I do think that's pretty severe to be tying your child to.
I mean, for days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was he at all let out for days, or was he there literally for days?
I don't know, but oh my God, I'd hope so, because that's torturous to be letting somebody sit in their own pee and poop. Because that's what I'm saying.
So at that point, it's like that goes way beyond like, oh, you're not the best parent, but fair. You've got a lot of other things to deal with in your life too. Now you're just straight up abusing your child.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's just, I think it's a gray area. I don't know. It was
I'm not making a judgment on them as parents, but it's just like, seems like not the best.
Yeah, it was the 50s in Vietnam, and I don't know what that was like, but it sounded pretty scary. Anyway.
Yeah.
So when Charles was 9, the family was ordered to move back to France. And I guess when he was 9, it would be like 50. He was born in 44. Oh, this is embarrassing.
53.
53. I would have gotten that. So Charles would go with the rest of his family. But he was not happy about it. Charles did not want to move to France, but he did.
I wouldn't want to move with them either, but okay.
I don't know. I guess now as an adult, I'd be like, yeah, sick. I'd want to move to France. I'd want to move out of the war zone and into a nice.
True. France. Yeah, actually. Yeah.
But that's, 28-year-old me thinking that. So Charles and the other kids were enrolled in a French Catholic boarding school. Sounds like fun.
I feel like boarding schools can go one of two ways.
Yeah, and I think
awesome
it was
or terrible.
I think this, like when he gets involved in like the Catholic school, this is where he starts being called Charles. I think until then it was his previous name.
That makes sense.
So soon after that, Tran gave birth to baby number 5. Lost track of the name on that one. There's just a lot.
Fine.
And she and Alphonse would end up going back to Saigon. And this time they took the youngest 3 kids, but left Charles and Nicole to stay in France in boarding school.
Oh. Okay.
They wanted the 2 older kids to continue getting a good French education, and they worried that they would not be able to look after all 5 kids in Saigon as it was still experiencing a bunch of violence.
Yeah, I mean 5 is a lot. That's a lot of kids.
And it doesn't end there.
Oh, okay. Okay, go on.
So it seemed like the choice to leave Charles and Nicole in France was an honest attempt to do the best for their children. But
Okay.
Charles did not see it that way, and he felt as if he were being abandoned again.
That's
And
so shitty.
yeah, and he and Nicole would be at different boarding schools because they were gender segregated.
Oh, okay.
And while Nicole thrived where she was, especially since she had lived in France before and already knew how to speak French, Charles had a pretty awful time.
Ugh.
First of all, to add to this equation, Charles had been having a problem with bedwetting for quite
Oh
a
yeah.
while.
Classic serial killer childhood
Yes,
behavior.
I knew you would say that.
Yeah.
Now,
Who else? What other serial killer did that?
I think it was Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't remember which one. Excusez-moi.
It is one of those things that psychologists consider a common factor in serial killer childhood. So
yes,
take of that what you will.
I think I'll explain a little bit, but this was a problem that Tran had tried very hard to fix. She kept taking him to doctors and they would run a bunch of tests.
She kept chaining him to the bed and like,
yeah, and you'll see what else she does. But the general consensus among them was that this was not a physiological problem, but rather a psychological problem.
For sure.
And they felt that the bedwetting would probably solve itself when Charles overcame his feelings of insecurity. So to them, it was like, he's feeling insecure. That's why this is happening. Completely.
Something tells me he's not gonna overcome his feelings of insecurity.
No, literally.
It's so
never.
shitty. Yeah.
His issues with his dad.
I mean, how could he? He has no parental support. Like,
it's hard because I feel like, and again, this is all
his dad doesn't want him, and his mom like has too much going on to handle him.
So I think that his dad definitely is the main issue. I think it's clear that his dad doesn't really.
I think his mom just doesn't have. Yeah, I just think his mom doesn't have the resources to help him. Like, I'm not saying she doesn't want to, but she clearly isn't capable of doing it necessarily. And it might not be out of any bad intention. It might just be because of like the lot in life that she has. But
yeah, I think
ultimately the result ends in him not having that, you know?
I think for the issue with Charles, and like we'll get into a little bit maybe more of why I feel this way, but I think that he has this really unrealistic perception of his dad and like really idolizes his dad.
For sure, because he wants his approval.
And then his dad doesn't want him. But his other two parents, like based on this book specifically, it seems like his mother and Alphonse really do care for him and try to be there for him, but Charles kind of sees them as like, he makes up in his head that they don't love him and that they want to abandon him, when I think that they were making choices that they thought were the best for him. Whether or not they were or not is kind of debatable, I suppose. But I think that they always did want the best for him, and I think Alphonse did try to be a good dad for him, but Charles kind of rejected them. And so
shout out Alphonse.
Yeah, it's all very murky, but I think some of it is like an actual, like his dad being a piece of shit to him, and then some of it I think is like due to that fucked up relationship, him like making up that the other two were shitty to him, when I don't really think they were that shitty to him.
She tied him to the bed for days. That's shitty.
Yes, but I think I agree. But
I think if my parents did that, like, I don't think I would. It would be very, very hard to overcome the trauma of that, like, to be honest.
Yes, I do agree. It's just, this is a woman who grew up.
No, I'm not hating on her. I'm just talking about the effects on the child. Like, that's gonna fuck him up. And why is he gonna ever want to respect her after that? You know?
Yeah.
Like, how is he gonna see her as like a stable, trustworthy authority figure in his life?
Yes, I think that's the right way to look at it. I think that I don't necessarily blame her for that specifically. I think that was like the circumstance. She did that. It was probably a bad idea. She probably regretted it after. It caused the damage. It led to that, what you just said, him like not being able to trust her and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I just think like the dad was like maliciously shitty, and the mom was like trying and like didn't know what she was doing.
Yeah.
She was also 20 when she had him, so she had him as a baby.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's very interesting, and it's the family dynamics is like, it's so hard to put yourself in that position and like understand what was going on, so it's hard to like make judgment calls and yada yada. But I think that's an accurate take.
Yeah. Like I really take the perspective of the effect on the kid.
Yeah.
That's like what's interesting to me. And I think that there's a lot of times where parents' intentions and actions don't align, and it's not necessarily through fault of their own. I think up until recently, like the knowledge that what you do as a parent affects your child wasn't as talked about, I guess. It was just kind of brushed off like, oh yeah, this kid had this bad childhood, but look what he became. But now we kind of see it as this is the whole reason that he is that way.
Yeah, I just think that like that was a bad incident. I don't think that she had like a pattern of abuse.
Okay, got it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Still, that'll do it.
Whereas like I think a ton of like the kids that he was surrounded with like were literally homeless.
Yeah.
I think it's unarguable to say that like in the situation that he was in, he had no doubt a much more privileged and like he just had a better upbringing, maybe not psychologically, but
right.
He had a much more privileged upbringing than a lot of kids around him.
Yeah.
Specifically in
That's
Vietnam, not necessarily in France.
Right.
But I digress. So, Tran not really knowing what to do with this information about the bedwetting, I think she didn't really understand. I think at the time, a doctor telling you that this is psychological maybe was not the most intuitive thing, or like it wasn't really, I don't think she really got that was a psychological thing, and she didn't know what to do. So she started tying a piece of string around his penis at night.
See, like this is not good parenting.
It's not.
I don't know why you're defending her.
Because I think that she was trying to help him. I don't think it was.
Yeah, but come on.
I just don't think you can judge. Like, I think that what she did.
I'm not judging. I'm just objectively stating like that's not a good choice to make to your child.
Absolutely, it's not a good choice, and it did not help.
Right.
I don't think she like tied it tight, or like I don't think it was. It was just weird.
It's super weird.
It is super weird. This tying the string around the penis shockingly did not help with the bed.
I can't.
He continued
I cannot even
to wet the bed. I
so
don't know where she got that trick, but
that strategy.
Yeah, but that happened. But obviously that didn't last long because he went off to boarding school, so she wasn't doing that then.
That's good.
So while Charles was at school, the bedwetting continued, and he hated it there. He did not understand French because he had not been to France before, like his sister. And so he was put in a class of boys 3 years younger than him. And the kids were also pretty racist towards him, especially because he is half Vietnamese, half Indian, and he's in Catholic French boarding school. And on top of that, he's from the country that France is fighting at the time. So like that added to the what I'm sure would have already been a pretty racist
just like the xenophobia.
Yeah.
The fear of others.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other kids, of course, found out about the bedwetting. It is a boarding school. So
that's not good.
A shitstorm. And about 1 year into his schooling, there's more where you're gonna not take her side, but not that I'm taking her side, but anyway. So 1 year into schooling, Tran showed up at the school, and Charles was so happy to see her, but he immediately realized that he couldn't understand her because he'd forgotten how to speak Vietnamese. And so that was like terrifying to him because he wanted nothing more than to go back to Asia. So Tran spoke to him in the French like what little French she could speak, and she told Charles that he would be coming home to live with the family, but that Alphonse was very sick and that his father, Hochand, was dead.
Whoa. Okay.
So big bombs dropping.
Yeah.
This news was very shocking for Charles, more so about his father being dead. I don't think he really cared much about
He's like, I don't give a fuck about Alphonse.
I feel like every time somebody tries to talk to him about Alphonse, he's like, I don't fucking care. He's not my real dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the news about getting to leave boarding school was also a huge relief. So I think on the whole, he was like, okay, whatever, but I'm leaving. So the family did move back to Saigon, but did not move back to Saigon, sorry, but instead they moved to Dakar, which is the capital city of Senegal. For anybody who doesn't know, that is a country in Africa. So this travel took place around the birth of Tran's 7th child, Martine.
Oh my God.
I've missed another child. Another child had been born between the last child that I couldn't even know the name of. Like, there's just kids popping out left, right, and center.
I feel bad. Like, that's a lot of kids for one woman to have.
That is an insane amount of children. And as we'll see too,
so many.
The mental state of Alphonse is just taking a deep dive right now. So it's like a very tumultuous situation. So now there are 7 children, Tran and Alphonse. Dakar was a pretty cool, a new city, very different from France. When they landed, they spent some time at a hotel so that Tran could recover from just having had a baby. Charles took this time to go explore the city of Medina, which is in Dakar, I believe. And it seems to be considered like the cultural center of Dakar. There, Charles got to experience some very interesting African culture, dancing, lots of vibrant colors and clothing and street food and friendly street kids. But also there was a bit of a dark side too. There was witch doctors and just like people living in slums and more dark sites. And I think that was very fascinating to him. And I mean, I don't think Charles was like a stranger to, like, he was living as a street kid in a war-torn Saigon. So it's not like he was like a kid from Canada going there,
he probably felt at home in that environment then.
Yeah, I think he was very interested by it. And it was definitely way different than being a Catholic boarding school at France.
Probably way better for him.
Which is what he was just coming from.
Yeah, like socially, I mean, probably he felt like he fit in a lot more because it sounds like he really didn't fit in at the boarding school.
Yeah, I think, and it sounds way more interesting personally to me. But after a few weeks
that Catholic boarding school, no offense, but that doesn't sound very fun.
No, who wouldn't?
I don't know. I don't know, but
never been there, but it doesn't sound
ideal for a child, you know.
But after a few weeks after, when the mother Tran had recovered, they were whisked off to the barracks in a much more boring area of town, and it was super dull compared to Medina. But it turns out that Alphonse being sick was more of an issue with his failing mental health due to years in a war zone. A lot of different, they didn't say specifically in the book, but a lot of other places said that he had shell shock. Or I guess we would now.
Is that just like PTSD?
That. Yeah. And
I mean, I'd be shocked if he didn't, like, you know.
Yeah, which is that's why I'm like kind of confused. I guess if you do administrative work, you still like see a lot of bad shit, but it doesn't sound like he was like on the like lines or whatever. I don't really know.
Yeah, but I still think just being around it, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I think you can, you know, it makes sense. And it's not super clear that he's getting like adequate treatment for this, so I think he was suffering a lot and having really bad nightmares, which he was.
God, can't imagine.
Yeah, so at night he would be taking sleeping pills and like just knocking out, but also like having terrors and stuff.
Oh God.
And to make Tran sound even better, she spent her evenings sneaking off with friends and going gambling.
Okay, I mean, I guess she needs like, you know, she needs something positive in her life at this point.
Yeah. If I had 7 kids and like a husband who was checking out, I'd be
like, get me the fuck out of here.
I'd be doing something with my time. It was also apparent that she was cheating on Alphonse. And Charles
Oh no.
Charles really resented this. And even though he was not a fan of Alphonse, he once caught, I think, his mom with like some other guy and like started throwing rocks at her and calling her a whore.
Oh God.
So it
Very
doesn't sound
shades
like,
of Paul Bernardo.
yeah, it doesn't sound like he took that very well.
No.
But anyway, it also seemed that Tran and Alphonse had been super sketchy about the alleged death of Charles's father. They were
What's the deal with that?
They were really evasive whenever he asked questions about it, and Charles was starting to believe that he wasn't actually dead. Now, on a positive note, Charles had begun to really earn the love and respect of his younger siblings, who he'd, not spent time with. They thought he was really cool and they really looked up to him. They had no idea that he was only their half sibling. I don't see why it would have made a huge difference, especially if they thought he was super cool, but they didn't know that. And at night, he would take them out exploring while his parents weren't paying attention because of the sleeping pills and gambling.
That is cool. Like, I would think he's cool.
Yeah, they thought he was like a cool older brother. So one night, Charles got the brilliant idea to steal some candies from a local little like shop owner guy. Brilliant. And this mission was successful. And all of his siblings thought it was so cool and awesome. And during that, Charles realized how easy it was to steal and like get away with things and be sneaky.
Fuck.
Not really good, but within the next few days, some of his younger siblings attempted to do the same thing, but they were immediately caught the next day when the shop owner found the trail of candy wrappers leading from his shop to their home.
Oh my God.
So they were like way more amateur than him. And so from that point on, Charles's shoplifting habit turned into like kind of an obsession. It was something that he was really good at. When they were out, his siblings would like point things out that they wanted in stores, and then the next day Charles would show up with that item and he never got caught. He was enrolled in a school in Dakar, but he hardly ever attended classes and he did very poorly. He would just forge his father's or Alphonse's signature on absentee forms. And at some point, Alphonse noticed Charles's very poor performance, and instead of reprimanding him, he pulled Charles out of school and he got him an apprenticeship at a mechanic. So this seems to be like Alphonse's style. Like, he never gets mad. He's like, okay, this is happening. I will find a solution. Here you go. And I think like that's just his way. Right. And I think, some kids would thrive with that. But I think Charles was like, you're a fucking pussy. Like that. I think that's how Charles saw it. Yeah. But this apprenticeship only lasted a few days before Charles was fired.
Okay.
He had fucked around with some wires intentionally and nearly burned down the whole building. So they were like, the mechanic, who I think was a friend of Alphonse, was like we can't have him here. He's going to.
Yeah.
So he was promptly returned.
Yeah.
And so Alphonse could not understand what was going on with Charles and why he was behaving so poorly. On top of this, his mental health was like in a huge decline, as we know, and he just keeps getting worse.
Yeah.
And things were not great between the two of them. So at age 15, Charles was convinced that his father was still alive.
Yeah.
And he decided to try to run away and go back to Saigon. So he was so convinced, even though
that seems challenging to get back there.
Yeah, he's in Dakar. He's
like, how are you gonna? Okay.
Well, this is a very what's the word? I said it before. He's crafty. He's he figures shit out.
Okay.
Please excuse me, but my like really bad baby brain, I like have a hard time putting sentences together, but I'm trying. Okay. So he's like so convinced, like his parents have not admitted it, but he's like, I don't believe you. I know he's not dead and he's going to go to Saigon. So like you have to really have conviction in that assertion that you think that your dad is not dead.
Yeah.
So one night he like packed up some shit and he snuck out and made it to the whatever city it was that was near the ports.
Okay.
I think it might have been Medina, like that's where they started out, but wherever he got to the sea. Right. And he found a ship that would be headed to Marseille the next day. And he knew that if he could get to Marseille, that there would be ships leaving daily to Saigon.
Okay.
So his plan was to just like walk on board with everybody. Remember, this is like the 50s. This is Africa. It's like
Yeah.
not the like
It's not as
QR
controlled
code
travel.
scanning. Yeah.
Yeah,
that we have
yeah.
now, right.
Right.
So he got to the beach and he just slept on the beach overnight. He caught some crab to eat for dinner. He cooked it over a fire in a tin can. And the next day, he saw port authorities checking all of the young passengers against a photo. And so he knew that his parents had reported him missing.
Right.
And they probably knew exactly what he was going to do. So he knew that there was no way that he was going to just sneak onto a ship. So he slept on the beach for another 3 days, eating crabs and sea urchins, until one day, like after the third day, Alphonse showed up and found him and brought him back home.
Oh, okay.
And so soon after that incident, Alphonse learned that he was wanted back in France by the military. So the family packed up and they went back to France. And Charles was happy about this because he thought it's at least one step closer to Saigon. So he's not upset about this.
Okay.
Back in France, Charles was now 15 years old, still wet in the bed at night.
Oh, damn.
Alphonse tried to enroll him in another boarding school. He wanted to keep him away from the other kids because he felt Charles was a really bad influence on them, and very clearly he was.
Yeah.
But no boarding school would take him because of his super poor school records.
Yeah.
He did end up at an agricultural college really far from the family, like distance-wise. And this time at school, Charles actually was beginning to thrive. He was doing well.
Okay.
The other kids there thought he was really cool and worldly. And like, I guess he'd come back with like a much more confident attitude. I think after he started all his like shoplifting and like,
yeah,
being a criminal, basically, he's like, no, like this is cool. I can do this. There's things that I'm good at, whatever.
Yeah.
He's like a more confident guy. One of his teachers in particular took a strong interest in him and thought that he had potential, like he had really good potential. I think he came off as like a really smart kid, but like with zero work ethic.
Right.
So the teacher sent a letter to Alphonse and Tran asking for Charles's father's address so Charles could correspond with him, because he felt that would be helpful, because I think he saw the obvious father issues that Charles was having.
Yeah.
So at this point, it was clear that they had lied, that the father was not actually dead, and everyone knew it. But Tran was not giving up on this.
This is fucked.
She wrote the teacher back and basically asked him to just like butt out and mind his own business. And it was true.
Somebody's trying to like give him what he needs.
Yeah, that Hotchin was not dead. Tran had told Charles that he was, because she knew that his father didn't want anything to do with him. And she saw how badly Charles wanted to be with him. And at this point, Hotchint had 6 other kids with 2 different women. And she just knew that he simply wasn't interested in being a part of Charles's life. So Tran did this because she wanted to protect Charles from that. And she wanted him to just not, that was her idea of like what to do to like break this, like where other people were like, he has to be able to correspond with his dad. She's like, well, if I just pretend he's dead, then like he has to just get over it.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that.
That was the choice they made. Did not work out clearly, but that's what they did. So that the teacher tries to get involved in like whatever, and they're like, nah, just leave us alone. And Charles's good behavior at school unfortunately did not last very long.
Oh, you don't say.
No, never does. And then he ran away from the school. So when his parents got word that he had run away, Alphonse went looking for him, and he did find him like roaming around. And Alphonse was finally honest with him to his face about his father, and he explained exactly why they had lied, and that they did it because they loved him and they didn't want to see him get hurt. But Charles still wanted to go back to Saigon. So
that's so sad, and his dad just does not care.
Yeah, and it's like, I think that's like it's like that situation is like a very classic thing you hear. I've no history of like divorce or whatever, but I know people who grew up without dads and like their dads are still around or whatever. But like, you know, if I tried to put myself in that position as a mom, growing up with a child, knowing that the dad doesn't want anything to do with them, I think that's like a good solution, is to be like, look, let's just cut this off. This guy is not good. Like, how sad would it be to see your child like want so badly for a relationship with their father, and the father just be like, nah, I don't really care.
Because there's nothing you can do. You can't offer that to them, and they are obviously hurting for it so much.
That as a mother would just break my heart.
Yeah. Because what can you do? You have no power in that situation, and you know how bad your kid needs that. Yeah. But like, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, it's just sad. Makes me very sad. But so Alphonse tries to like sit down and like talk to him about it, but he's still just like,
oh, Alphonse.
Yeah, poor Alphonse. Like, he's like, I don't know.
What do I even do?
So Charles comes back to the family home with Alphonse. I guess he's kicked out of boarding school, agricultural college.
Yeah.
And he found work in a kitchen.
Okay.
And things were okay for a little bit. Again, I think it's like every time Charles gets like a new job or goes to a new school or whatever, he's like does really well for like 2 weeks and then fucks everything up. At that point, he ran away again. This time, he got a little bit farther. He took an accomplice with him, a friend named Michael. Michael was like, I guess he was, I don't know where Charles met him, but he was living in France. He was a little bit younger than Charles and thought Charles was really cool. So he's like tagged along and did what Charles told him to do.
Okay.
And the two boys made it aboard a passenger ship that had stops along the way, but that was bound for Saigon. They snuck on board and they hid among the food and supplies. And once the ship had taken off, Charles emerged from the cargo and waltzed into the first class area, made himself at home, and left Michael hidden away. I guess he had like known what the plan was. He like wore a little suit and everything.
Oh.
And Charles made friends with some of the other first class passengers. He dined with them.
Wow. Okay.
Quickly learned how easy it was to simply just blend in and act like he was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And Michael, the first time he left for like the whole day, and like poor Michael's just like sitting in the cargo. And so Charles comes back eventually after having like the time of his life, and Michael's like, I want to go too. And Charles is like, no, you're too young and you wouldn't be able to fake it. Like, you'll ruin it for me. So Michael had to stay in the cargo, just like chilling there with like Charles brought him back scraps. And then Charles is just like schmoozing and like being like,
he's like, sorry, you can't come.
I'm a first class guy. Which is kind of funny, but it's like kind of dickish.
Yeah.
And it's like a long journey. Like, this is multiple days. So the ship's first stop was in, I can't pronounce this, but I don't know how to pronounce this.
Try. I definitely won't know.
I'm gonna just look up how to pronounce it. It's a city in
there was one episode I did where I forget what it was that I had to pronounce, and I just couldn't do it. It was so just like, I know I'm going to embarrass myself.
It's an African country.
Okay.
Okay. Aidan, cut some of this out. Djibouti.
Okay.
Djibouti. This was a French-speaking African country located in the Horn of Africa. And this is where Michael got the boys caught by foolishly blabbing to a store owner that like what they were doing.
This is exactly why he didn't let you out of the cargo, Michael.
Yes. But the thing was, so they got there and like Charles just understands how to read people.
Yeah, that's interesting that he has that skill, considering he like
really
wasn't
does.
fitting in school and stuff in boarding school. Like, it's interesting.
Michael is like watching him, and Charles is like meets these people on the beach and tells them exactly what they're doing, and but they're like cool people, and like they're like give them a ride into town and blah blah blah. And then Michael's like, oh, I'll just do that too, and he like says to like some shop owner that, and the shop owner's like, I'm fucking calling the cops, like you know, like he doesn't know how to read the room the way Charles does.
Right. Which is interesting.
Yeah. It's like Charles is really adaptive. Like he really like he's figured out criminal behavior from a very young age.
And probably for him, like he knows what it's like to not fit in. So he's incentivized to blend in more.
Yes. And I don't know where this Michael fella comes from, but Charles has a lot of life experience for his age.
Yeah.
So I think that helps.
That makes sense.
So the boys were reported and they were sent back home.
Okay.
And their parents had, of course, reported them missing and had been worried sick. Charles was very upset about being caught. And he knew that if he had been on his own, then he would have completed the journey. This was a lesson that Charles would never forget.
Oh, fuck. Can't rely on anybody else,
Nope.
Basically. Yeah.
So Tran and Alphonse met the boys at the port when they arrived home. And interestingly, too, one of Charles's teachers, I think from the agricultural school, like met them there too. Like there's another adult who's like really giving a shit about Charles.
I know they're trying. I mean,
and whatever. So the parents were both very relieved to see Charles. They tried to chat with him nicely and everything, but Charles was just super pissed.
Yeah.
And by this point, I think Alphonse had kind of had it with all the bullshit. But again, he was not allowed an angry guy. So instead, he struck a deal with Charles. He said that he would write to Hochend and ask if he would let Charles live with him. And he said if Hochend says yes, then he would allow him to go live in Saigon. But he's like, if he says no, Charles, you have to give up this idea and accept that your father just doesn't want you in his life. And I don't think he put it like that, but like he basically was like, not. This is the ultimatum. You know, if he says yes, then go and fine, be happy. That's what you want.
Okay.
If not, like you have to stop trying to run away. So Charles agreed to this. He was very optimistic that his father would accept him in his life, even though all the evidence made that seem very unlikely.
I know.
And you know, Charles was not a fool. He was like, I want to see you write that. I want to see you mail it. I don't want any bullshit from you. Like
fair, yeah.
And so Alphonse was very upfront, and that's what they did. He wrote to Hochend with the request, and Hochend actually replied that he would be in France for a month and that they could all discuss this idea while he was there. He actually replied like nicely.
Weird. You wouldn't think, but okay.
No. During his visit, he questioned Charles about many things. He was very judgmental about Charles's job at the kitchen. He felt he was way above that. So Charles immediately quit. Hochend agreed to get Charles a passport and buy him a ticket and let him come live and work for him. Charles was ecstatic, but the passport did not arrive before Hochend left. Hochend promised to send him a ticket after the passport arrived. Charles was very skeptical about this promise. I think he just didn't trust any of the adults in his life.
Fair.
Which, yeah, I think that's quite fair.
Mm-hmm.
But he pretty much had no choice but to trust his father because he needed a passport.
Yep.
It wasn't until maybe a month later, after his father had left, that the passport finally arrived. Still, though, Charles patiently waited for his ticket to arrive in the mail, and that never came.
Oh, God.
So Charles, it's unclear what exactly happened here, if his dad had intentions of sending a ticket but just never did. It seems like, to me, the most likely scenario is he just didn't really give a shit and just didn't send a ticket.
Yeah.
But Charles would not give up, and he decided he needed to buy one himself. But he was nearly out of all money since he had quit his job because his father looked so down upon it. And he didn't think his parents would buy him one, so he came up with a very stupid plan.
Oh, okay.
He used the last of his money to purchase a gun. Then he took said gun to a home in the middle of the day and robbed a woman at gunpoint. So this plan, he thought about it for a long time. He was super nervous about it. I think he knew it was not a good idea. But he was like, this is my only chance. I have to do it. So he knocked on her door and he pretended to be some sort of service worker. The woman let him in, and immediately he pulled out a gun, and she directed him to her purse where she had some cash. He then tied her up in her bedroom next to her crying baby.
Aww.
And he told her to wait at least half an hour before calling for help. He left with the money. He could not believe that he got away with it. It was such a relief, but it was not enough money.
Damn.
Now, with a renewed sense of confidence, Charles decided to give it another go. So he chose a unit in an apartment complex, big mistake, huge, and he repeated the process. But during the process of this robbery, there was a young child in the home that was not a baby, and that child managed to escape the unit during the kerfuffle and went to tell somebody. Charles booked it out of there, but he ended up having to hide in the basement, where soon an entire group of men found him and dragged him out. The authorities were called. Charles was hauled off to the police station, where he met with Alphonse and Tran.
Oh, fuck.
So he did not end well.
No.
Charles was mortified. He cried like a baby. His parents were shocked. They were super embarrassed. They couldn't believe that their son had done this. The police stood him in front of his parents and the woman that he tried to rob, and Charles cried and apologized, and he pleaded for mercy. The woman felt really bad, and she withdrew her complaint, and Charles was allowed to go home.
Oh.
A few days later, the police asked Alphonse to bring Charles back to the station, where they asked him, had he ever committed a robbery before? To which Charles lied, and he said no. Another big mistake. Huge.
Yeah.
The police knew that this wasn't true because they had spoken with the victim of the first robbery. And so Charles was arrested on the spot, and within a few hours, he was put up in front of another judge, his parents, and victim number one, and jail. A few days into it, Tran came to visit, and she was alone. And she told Charles that Alphonse had been hospitalized for a nervous breakdown.
Oh my God, poor Alphonse.
Yeah, and that it was all Charles's fault.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, and Charles...
He's a kid. You can't put that responsibility on him.
No, but I think he must be like 15, 16, 17 at the time.
I mean, I'm sure he's stressing him out, but like, come on. He's not responsible.
I'm very biased because like I see what he did after, and like I think he's a really bad guy.
He's a shitty kid, but like he, you know.
Yeah. I just like he's
like, I think Alphonse got fucked up from the war and then just like never had a chance afterwards.
Yeah. Definitely the war is responsible for his like
mental issues
of his mental issues. But I think also,
I mean, yeah,
I don't think it's ever a good idea to be like, this is your fault.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, don't like it's, yeah.
I do think that this situation is what like pushed him over the edge.
Yeah.
Like,
he's trying his best, it sounds like.
It's just like not helpful to say that.
Yeah, anyway, exactly.
She did. And so Charles felt horrible, and he sat sulking and crying in his cell. And poor Alphonse's condition just worsened and worsened. And so then Charles was called before the examining magistrate. And mind you, I don't know that we're in France right now, I think, right? Yes, we're still in France. I get confused about where in the world they're at. It's always moving. But I don't really know how the legal system works. Like there's all these different words that I'm not super familiar with. So I'm just going with that. But anyway, he was called before the examining magistrate. And on his way in, he was introduced to victim number one, and he apologized to her and begged her to forgive him. And she felt bad for Charles and his mother, who's there also. And I'm sure that this was like a very big situation. And so she also withdrew her complaint. So Charles was sentenced to 6 months, but he was given a suspended sentence, which meant that he could go home. So he is not being held accountable for any of his actions here.
No.
Let's just...
I mean, I get why they'd feel bad for him, but like, yeah, probably not the best.
You just can't go into people's homes and rob them at gunpoint. That's not cool.
No. And not face any consequences for it.
Yeah. So when he got home, he found out that his passport had been seized. Not for his crimes, but because apparently they realized that they had issued it by mistake, because Charles was not really a French citizen, so they could not authorize him a passport. So that's kind of murky and weird, but it was devastating for Charles because he just wanted to go to Saigon. But Alphonse came to the rescue. Alphonse had apparently, like right before he had his nervous breakdown that ended him in the hospital, the last thing he did was arrange to get Charles a one-way ticket to Saigon on a temporary visa. That was the best he could do. And so Charles would be off to Saigon very soon. It was finally happening.
Yeah, finally.
So Charles went to go visit Alphonse in the hospital, and he apologized to him for the way he had been for like, I guess, his whole life. And I think that this whole situation and sitting in jail for a little bit, Charles started to realize and understand like the low-key unconditional love that Alphonse had for Charles, despite Charles being a dick to him for like his whole life. And so he like apologized to him and they had a little chat, and Alphonse
That's nice.
accepted the apology and wished Charles well on his trip.
Yeah, like Alphonse isn't gonna hold the grudge.
Yeah, he seems like a nice, cool dad. Like with
he's trying his best.
Yeah. So in March of 1961, at nearly 17 years old, he'd be 17 in April.
Right.
Charles left for Saigon. He sailed for 3 weeks and was greeted by Hochand and 3 of his daughters in Vietnam.
Okay.
Things were a lot different in Saigon than Charles had remembered. The Vietnam War was well underway. It's only later in that year that America would officially get involved. So that's where like they are in the war.
Okay.
Hochand had a huge apartment, and he was now remarried to a woman who had previously been one of his servants. So this is, I think, different than the woman who was there last, who made Charles be a street kid. I don't know if that was the same as the Indian woman who he had an arranged marriage with, but it's another lady.
Okay.
Together, the 2 of them had 3 daughters, and she was now pregnant with a son, which Hochand was pretty psyched about. They didn't at the time know it was a son, but later they would find out. Charles got right into things. He immediately began working at the tailoring business. He started out super strong, gave it his all, was working really hard. He loved being in charge and like getting to, be like, he wasn't the boss, but I guess he was like managing things or whatever.
Yeah.
And he just he had dreams and hopes that one day he would be a partner with his dad in the business, and they'd be like a father and son, like tailoring business. Like me and my dad forever. He's the coolest and greatest. But soon Charles became a victim of his own poor work ethic, and he became distracted. He was making friends and like being interested in girls, and being interested in girls meant that he needed money. So he started gambling and doing like different illegal schemes to make money. And all of that was taking up all of his time. And so like he was involved in some like courses or schoolwork that he was just failing and not doing well at the job. And he just like instantly became a large disappointment for Hochand. And so then at some point, I guess after the temporary visa expired, he was called before the court to see what would happen. And he was told that since his mother was Vietnamese and since he was born there, he could become a citizen of Vietnam.
Okay.
But only if he joined the military and began fighting in the war. And Charles was like down for that. He's like, okay, I'll do that. But his father was like, no, we're too good for that. So he decided instead to send Charles to India so that he could get Indian citizenship. So to get Indian citizenship, it meant that Charles would have to live in India for 1 year, learn one of the dialects, and become familiar with Indian culture. Charles lasted for about 3 weeks before the vegetarian food and lack of indoor plumbing got to him, and he was like,
oh my God.
He's like, I
this.
Want some fucking beef.
Yeah, too vegetarian. Yeah.
So he snuck onto a ship and made his way back to Saigon, enraging his father. Hochand was pissed, and Charles had not been behaving himself or listening to anyone. He was not used to such disobedience from his children. I guess Hochand had like a bunch of daughters and stuff, and like he was a strict father, so like his kids did not act like this. So he put Charles right back on a ship headed for Bombay, determined for Charles to finish his 1-year-long stay. But instead of getting off in India, Charles stayed on board and headed back to Marseille.
Yeah, like, is Charles really going to listen at this point? He's definitely not.
He doesn't listen to anyone.
Yeah, he's clearly not going to listen, but okay.
So once in France again, he was issued a visitor's passport, but was not permitted to work because, again, he also did not have citizenship in France.
Right.
This is like the most annoying thing for him, and like for anybody in this situation. He does not have a homeland. He does not have citizenship in any country at this point.
That's pretty fucked.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
And like I think many people see this as like a big
like identity crisis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Charles continued on a downward trajectory once being back in France. Since he was not allowed to work legally, he resorted to a bunch of petty crime. He stole cars. He started learning how to do fraudulent checks and like that kind of stuff.
Okay.
He was eventually caught and landed in a psychiatric prison. It's unclear why it was specifically a psychiatric prison, but it was for stealing a car. And when he was there, it wasn't for like a super long time, or like he didn't have a really long sentence, but he tried to make an escape with a few other inmates. And that incident landed him a 5-year prison sentence,
Wow.
which was much harsher than what he originally had. So that was a big mistake.
Yeah.
And so during his 5 years stay in, I think it's called Poissy prison,
Okay.
in France, he was introduced to a man named Felix Descong.
Okay.
Felix Descon. That's what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Felix was a wealthy guy. I believe he had a background in law, not entirely sure, but he's a wealthy guy, young guy in his 20s. And he was volunteering in some sort of like prison mentorship program. And before meeting Charles, Felix was warned that if he was going to start spending time with Charles, he needed to commit to sticking around. He couldn't just meet Charles and then fuck off. It was clear that the prison staff, through their like psychological assessments and everything, understood that Charles had some severe issues stemming from his feelings of abandonment by his father and his
definitely
lack of country and whatever. Like they understood the psychology of that, which I think
that's
is
good.
interesting.
Yeah.
And so they were like, he like needs some serious mentorship and like a father figure. So like if you do this, you're doing it forever, basically. Like you have to be his friend forever.
Oh, okay.
And Felix is like, yeah, sure. So Felix agreed to these stipulations and he met with Charles. So the two quickly became friends. And Felix was really great to Charles. He visited him every week. He brought him books and they talked about philosophy and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And Charles grew to really respect Felix and saw him as a father figure, which I guess was their plan all along.
Yeah, that's good.
And Felix began looking into Charles's life and family to try to help him with his citizenship problems. He visited with Charles's mother to see what he could find. And she's like, I saved every single document of his, like, here, take it, do whatever you can do. She was very thankful for his help. She told him how much she cared about Charles and how she really hoped that Felix would be of help. She seemed genuinely confused about how Charles had ended up like in prison and like being a criminal. And she also seemed like she was kind of scared of him.
I think that, I could see that.
I think
which is sad.
It's sad, but it seems like it got to a point where it was like, she's like, I've probably my fault, like created this monster. And like, this is kind of scary. And I'd be probably kind of scared too.
I would.
And we'll see later that everybody should be scared of him.
That's like if you raise a dog and the dog starts biting you. Like I would be really scared.
Yeah, exactly. So Alphonse was still in a very deteriorated mental state, and it seemed as though he would never recover, and he was just like permanently hospitalized.
Damn.
Very sad.
That is really sad.
Felix also got in touch with Charles's father, Hotchend, who had some less than nice things to say about Charles at first.
Oh, come on.
And said he wanted nothing to do with his son. But with a little smooth talking, Felix finally convinced Hotchend to send over some new clothes and suits for Charles's release.
That's something.
What I gathered, I think, from reading about Charles's father was that he like a lot of people, like a lot of teachers and other people, like he did see genuine potential in his son. I think like when he came to visit France that one time and talked to him and stuff, he was like, this is a smart kid. Like,
yeah, he seems like a smart kid. Like he definitely does.
And like, he is a sad, like if he literally did put effort into like starting a business instead of just like fucking up with crime all the time.
Yeah.
I think he would do a really good job, but he just like can't help himself.
And he just didn't have the resources really.
Yeah, absolutely. So he knew his son was a smart kid, but he just saw him behaving recklessly and he felt that Charles lacked discipline and he was,
I mean, he does.
Yeah, he's like,
because you weren't there in his childhood.
Yeah. And I don't think the dad feels bad like the mom does.
Yeah.
So Felix took all the documents that he got from Tran and began to do some research into the citizenship problem. He thought, surely a person couldn't just be stateless forever. Like that just can't be a thing. So finally, he found an old law from 1898, which stipulated that a person, anyone born in Saigon, was allowed to obtain French citizenship.
Okay.
We don't know why. We don't know anything more about that, but that is a law. And so when Charles was released from prison in 1968 at age 24, Felix helped him obtain his citizenship, and he also let Charles come live in his home.
This Felix, he's
a cool guy.
He's really stepping up.
Yeah. He introduced Charles to his friends and invited him to dinner parties.
Nice.
And he secured Charles a job at a fire equipment company selling fire extinguishers. As part of Charles's parole, he was technically banned from the main center of town.
Okay.
But he just went there anyway.
Okay, yeah. Guess I'm not surprised.
At one of Felix's dinner parties, Charles met a woman named Chantal Campillon.
Okay.
And she was from a well-to-do conservative Parisian family. And Charles was instantly attracted to her and essentially followed her around and pretended to run into her near her school and convinced her to have lunch with him. And from there, he was very persistent with her, and soon they were a couple.
Okay.
Charles confided a bit in Chantal that he, had a bit of a criminal past, spent a little time in prison, but he very much downplayed the severity of it. And
what kind of was he a nice partner to her? What was he like in the relationship?
I think he definitely tried to really impress her at the beginning.
Okay, fair.
He was good to her.
That's good.
I think that I don't think anywhere in their relationship was he hitting her or being abusive physically toward her, but he just causes her life to be a complete horror show. She should have turned around and walked the other way immediately, but she did not.
She didn't see the red flags.
No, and you'll see people try to warn her.
Okay.
So Charles's job was not earning him much of a salary. So on the side and under Chantal's nose, Charles continued to forge fraudulent checks and steal cars. He would tell her that he had borrowed them, but she knew that he didn't have a license. And he started getting a real habit for gambling. That does not help him ever.
Yeah.
So Charles had one more 6-month stint in jail for car theft before he was able to marry Chantal. And she was there, I think what had happened is he had stolen a car. He told her that he borrowed it, and she was like, okay. And he's driving. He's trying to take her on a romantic date or whatever. But also he's driving a stolen car and he's speeding. If you're driving a stolen car, at least follow the fucking rules, man. At least just don't.
You would think, yeah.
But he's speeding and he gets pulled over, and they're like, this is a stolen car. You're going to jail. While she's in jail, Chantal's like, oh, I'm pregnant.
She went to jail too?
No. Well, he's in jail.
Oh, okay.
But she told him that she was pregnant. So he spent 6 months in jail. This is a little.
He's gonna be a father now. Seems like he's well equipped for that.
Yeah, it seems like this is just a recipe for a great life for all of them. Yeah. So when he gets out of prison, he got a job at a restaurant. Then he quit that job, or probably got fired, most likely, not sure. But then he got another sales job. I think he was selling matches or something. Okay. But again, it was not long before he was back to his criminal ways. It seemed like his mentality generally was he was unsatisfied with the money that he was able to make with the skills that he had. And he blamed other people in his past for keeping him down and not having citizenship. And so he would steal things, and he would justify that to himself, being I had a difficult past. And I think one thing with the whole Felix situation is I think Felix really tried to understand him and stuff, but it also, I think a big thing that Charles took from it with people trying to understand his past is I'm a victim. I've been victimized, and so it's justified.
Which is true, but
it's true, but it doesn't justify.
No.
He used that totally as a justification for his criminal actions.
And I think it's very, very hard to get out of the criminal life. I know for people who have that ability to make a quick buck, they don't know how to work their way up necessarily. They've never had to. So when they start, they have to get a shitty entry level job. That's all that's available to them. And then it's grueling work, and you're not making enough money. And then it's well, maybe I better just get back into stealing,
Well, exactly. You're working a shitty minimum wage job. You know that your wife is pregnant. And you're okay, well, I know that I could just forge this check and have $5,000.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm going to do that. So that's what he was doing. He just, I think his father did assess him properly. He had no discipline. This is not a disciplined person.
Who taught him? Nobody taught him. So,
Fair. But so it's not going well.
No.
So this was like basically the cycle of his
Just kind of like, how he was
criminal
working
activity.
or not. Yeah.
So Felix at the time was very worried about Chantal. He had
Okay.
seen everything, like, because Charles is living with him, so Chantal's over there all the time.
Right.
And he's seeing this happen. And I think at first he was like really impressed by Charles, but now he's seeing that he's like continuing his criminal activity and blah blah blah. And he's like, fuck, like this girl's gonna get totally fucked over. But he's like, I can't betray Charles and say anything. So he felt like really he felt a huge ethical dilemma of like whether or not to say anything to her and like destroy his relationship with Charles or whatever.
That is hard. Yeah.
So he eventually, while Charles was in prison for I think it was the car thing, he tried to warn her, and he like sat her down and was like, look, I think this is just not good for you. Whatever, like this is just, I can tell this is not going to stop, and like you should really just get out of this. And she was like, no, and she just marched right over to Charles, told him what Felix said, and then yeah. And
that's shitty because now Felix betrayed him in his eyes, and Felix is like the only parental,
Yeah, Charles didn't like it.
This is shitty.
So Charles was not happy with Felix, obviously, for trying to get his pregnant fiance to leave him. But things eventually boiled over, and Charles and Chantal got married, and I think Felix did attend the wedding. Her parents were not at all happy about this marriage. They did not like Charles. They knew he was a criminal. They watched in horror as their daughter married him anyway.
Yeah.
And so that's how their marriage started. And Charles continued to commit crimes after marriage. He started getting really into forging checks and spending a fortune and acting like he was super rich and gambling and losing everything.
Okay.
One day he decided to steal from his sister Nicole, who was doing well in life.
Come on, bro.
She had some children. She had a boyfriend at the time who owned a very successful restaurant that she helped to run. So one day, Charles showed up at the restaurant and told her that one of her kids had been in an accident. So he rushed her over to his place and he locked her inside.
The fuck?
Such a dick move.
His sister too. Like,
own sister.
Yeah.
So then he rushed back to the restaurant and he was like, it's an emergency. I need Nicole's purse and the receipts from the register. So he took those and he took Nicole's checkbook and he withdrew 6,000 francs from her bank account. Then he rushed over to a casino, hoping that he could take the money and like throw it and then bring it back and pay her back and be like, see, it's like, I just so awesome. I figured it all. But instead he lost all of the money.
Of course.
Shocking no one.
Yeah. So, how's it going to work that way?
So Nicole
definitely not.
Yeah. It's like every fucking time. In this book, like they've like outlined a number of times where he's like gone to a casino and like he's like doing really well. He's making all this money and then all gone because he doesn't know when to stop. So Nicole's pissed, obviously. She like Chantel's like, please don't do, like, we need like, I'll pay you back. I have to do it in installments. Like she tries to get involved and Nicole's like, fuck that. I'm calling the police. She had him charged. Multiple other family members tried to convince her to withdraw the complaint, but she wouldn't. Oh. At the time, Felix was away. And I'm sure Nicole has like seen this pattern of behavior. And like, I think for like, you should not enable that behavior. Like
that's
it gets to a certain point. Like she's like, no, I'm holding him accountable for his actions, for telling me that my child was in an accident, locking me up and losing 6,000 francs.
For sure.
Real life, but yeah, I'm kind of with Nicole.
It's like a lot. Yeah.
Felix was away at the time, but when he got home, he was able to finally convince Nicole to withdraw her complaint, and Charles was released.
Okay.
This last straw in France happened when Hotchkiss was visiting. This one that I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
So Hotchkiss was visiting, and desperate to
shocked that we have not reached the last straw yet, but okay.
Yeah. Well, the last like straw until like he has to flee the country, basically. Okay. But Charles is desperate to impress his father, so he opened a bank account and he started writing checks for well over the value of the bank account. And so he goes out shopping with his dad. He's like whining and dining his dad and pretending that him and Chantal are far better off than they really are. He's like he's like buying all the shit. He buys like a gold watch. He's like, here, dad, give this to Chantal. Like, say it's from you. Like, I'm such a great guy. Like, blah, blah, blah. And so,
Okay.
and Hotchin's like, wow, like, this is great. Like, good for him. He's like living his
God.
life and like successful. Good. So then him and Chantal and Hotchin, like, they go have a meal and they're like talking, and Charles is like, Charles has plans to take Chantal and the baby once it's born to Saigon and go like open a business there. And they're chatting about that and whatever. But once Hotchin is gearing up to leave, Charles realized that he probably has about 24 hours to get out of the country before the authorities figure out what he's done. Meanwhile, poor Chantal has no idea any of this is happening. Charles wanted, whatever, they want to go to Saigon, but he's like, okay, Chantal, pack up your shit. We got to get out of we got to get the fuck out of here because they're going to start coming for me. Well, Hotchin is there and they're trying to do all this behind his back. And she's like, what the hell? And it's this whole big mess. So because the authorities are essentially after them, or they believe they are, they like get in a car and I guess they steal a car and they journey through a number of countries on their way to their destination. Now, Hotchin had sent Chantal a letter in August of 1970 after he's figured out. So basically after Charles takes off, Hotchin takes off to go back home, and then everything comes to light about what they did. And they like Hotchin finds out, they like come asking him for shit. They're like, okay, well, if he comes to Saigon, we're going to arrest him, blah, blah, blah. Big issue. Yeah. So he sends Chantal a letter warning them not to come to Saigon. The consulate general had been warned about them, specifically had orders to arrest them and send them back to France, where they would be prosecuted in France. Hotchin also warned Chantal in that letter that Charles was a dangerous crook and that, quote, one day he will throw you in the sea or in jail, end quote.
Okay, that's very scary.
So once again, Chantal did not heed this advice, and she and Charles landed in Bombay, India, where Chantal soon gave birth to a baby girl. Bombay was not great for Chantal. Charles was obviously involved in more criminal activity, but at this point she'd stopped asking questions and just like accepted that this was what it was. And like, she's in Bombay right now, doesn't know anybody, so she's like, I just better like accept this. And she at this point is like, she's really into Charles and she like really respects him. I think he definitely has her, he like knows exactly how to talk to her, and like he's like treating her nicely, but like definitely like grooming her in a way.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's also clear now that Charles had started cheating on her all the time. He got some other woman pregnant in India, and Chantal just like sees him as this like really cool, like she like really looks up to him and like idolizes him and thinks that he's like this like guy who's like been a victim his whole life of this and that. Like he is really,
I'm sure he's good at framing that. Yeah,
exactly. So I think
and it is true. Like, he's been through a lot of shit.
Yeah, but it doesn't excuse him for like fucking up her life and cheating on her and all this shit.
Yeah,
but she's like, it's, you know, he's had a lot of problems, like, you know, he's gonna cheat on me, whatever, which is just very sad in and of itself. But that's how that went. Although he was constantly absent and super shady all the time, she was still super loyal to him. And she's still like, because she comes from a very like conservative family in France, so she's still acting like that,
right?
Which is like such a weird match for him because he's like the opposite of that or whatever. But she just was loyal to him and supported him in every way she could.
Okay.
Well, he went out and cheated on her.
So shitty.
Yeah. So my worst fear.
I know.
That I would.
Like, I thought you were gonna say it gets worse.
Oh, of course it gets far worse. Nobody's even dead yet. So Bombay had a pretty big elite scene. It was home to Bollywood. And so Charles got in with a lot of like rich people in the movie business.
Okay.
There was a lot of people there with money to spend on expensive items, jewelry, cars, and all that stuff. But a lot of these luxury goods were not available in India at the time. And now there's a lot of stuff going on in India. There's like India versus Pakistan is happening right now. And soon it's like Bangladesh is going to come into play and whatever. So like things are kind of turbulent there. And there's like bans on luxury goods. And I don't know a whole lot about that, but that's what's basically going on. So Charles had basically become the guy to acquire these things, and he had become an expert in the black market throughout the last couple of years of his life. So he was meeting all these people, and he was being like, oh, you want luxury goods? Like, I can go get them. He would like go to other countries, bring them back and sell them, and like had all these like very intense schemes. I will tell you about one of them in a few minutes. But one hurdle to these schemes was that he would have to go to other countries to acquire these goods, often like Hong Kong or places in Europe. And so he needed passports. And India had this system in place at the time where people traveling with luxury goods had to report the items on their passports and then produce those items upon leaving the country to keep goods and stuff from going in and out, and like basically to prevent exactly what Charles was doing.
Yeah.
So he would need a constant stream of new passports. Charles, so he figured out what he did was he noticed that there was a lot of young Western tourists. Like he was all over Asia doing this, right? Mm-hmm. So there was at the time there's a lot of tourists traveling, like all these like young people being like, I want to travel Asia, and like doing a lot of drugs, like these are hippies and whatever. So Charles personally found these people very offensive to him, and he didn't like them. He didn't like their hippie aesthetic, their obsession with marijuana, and like their general lax attitudes. Like he didn't like
wrong with marijuana.
Yeah, he was like he was stupid for that. And these people are all there. Like
he would not have liked me.
No. Like, he would have killed you. Like this man is a murderer. But these are all like kids traveling and like vacationing or like, you know, working.
Yeah, like privileged kind of situation.
Whatever. Yeah, and he's like, I've had to work my way through life, and like I've never been handed anything. So he like, I think he resented them in a way.
Fair, yeah.
But he realized that they were super easy to fool, especially because he had become like this really cool, suave guy, and everyone describes him as like sexual. So I think he's like exactly the type of person that, or he would become exactly the type of person that like they would want to meet and like think was really cool, and like
while they're like, traveling.
Yeah,
and
he'd be like I'm a guy from here that like is super cool. Like I'll show you that. Whatever. He's found it very easy to fool them. Yeah. So what he would do is he would spend time around them. He would find accomplices from them who like maybe they were like looking for money to continue traveling or whatever. And he like wouldn't tell them explicitly what he was doing, but like he would get them to get other people to trust him, or like get passports from other people for whatever reason, and then trick other people along with those accomplices to obtain passports essentially. And along with this, he had learned, or he'd become very good at disguising himself. Because of his kind of mixed background. He could pass for a lot of different ethnicities on all these different passports. He would have
That's interesting.
Wigs and fake mustaches and blah blah blah. And
wow, okay.
He knew a lot of different languages from like his life growing up, so he was really good at disguising himself. So he would use his disguises to match the appearance on the passports and travel to other countries, acquire goods, often by stealing or using stolen traveler's checks or just bad checks, and then bring back the goods to sell to the rich people in Bombay. And now I just wanted to read this one section of the book to give you an idea of like the type of schemes he was doing, because they're like quite impressive.
Okay.
I just think this is really interesting, and I thought I'd just like read this quote rather than try to put this in my own words, because it's like kind of complicated. But so the quote: he would collect deposits from several customers and fly to Geneva or Frankfurt, where he stole and bought secondhand the requisite number, I guess, of the car. This was talking about cars. Do you want to earn $200? He would ask backpackers heading east, and with Charles leading the way, the convoy of flashy European cars would speed eastward through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So he basically needed people to drive the cars. Okay. After showing a car to its future owner, Charles would take a further installment and promise to present it to them with papers legitimizing the ownership. He then booked a room at a 5-star hotel using whatever name or disguise was convenient. The car was taken to a garage he had rented for the purpose and stripped of all its extras. In the back streets of Bombay, a crash was staged involving the shell of the car. from his hotel, Charles called the police to report the wreck's whereabouts, while one of the accomplices removed its engine and gearbox. The police would report back that thieves had plundered the car. Charles was then entitled to sell it to the State Trading Corporation, which in turn put the vehicle up for auction. Once one of his accomplices would then buy the shell of the car, and along with the documents entitling him to its possession free of excise taxes. The car would be returned to the garage, repaired and refitted, and presented to its purchaser complete with the correct and necessary paperwork. Who could ever unravel such a complicated chain of minor illegalities?
Yeah.
So like he's a smart
It's elaborate.
guy.
Yeah.
So elaborate. He's like such a smart guy, like figuring all this shit out. Like that's a lot of moving pieces.
It's true.
Imagine he applied himself to something legal.
I know, I was gonna say, yeah.
Such a waste. So that's the type of shit he's doing. And meanwhile, Chantal is home with the baby being like, I don't know what he's doing, but like hopefully it's not too bad.
Oh my God.
We're in fucking Bombay.
He's definitely like doing bad shit, but okay.
So Charles became well known among certain high society circles. He was super cool and like exactly the same as he was with the child. Like he was very good at just like finding a group of people, knowing exactly what they'd think was like a cool guy and being that cool guy.
Right. Yeah. Especially like for a short term.
Yeah. And I think he also really liked like he felt that he should be within like the upper echelons of society. Like these were like the people he felt like he belonged with, you know? Okay. People liked being around him. He was exciting and interesting, and he was always the center of attention, and he could get people whatever they wanted, which is why they really liked him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But Charles also still had a big problem with gambling. And although he was great at making money and doing what he was doing, he just couldn't help himself with the gambling. So one day he took Chantal on a fancy trip, which he said would be like a honeymoon, to a city in China called Macau. And when he was going, he sent a letter to Felix basically bragging about how well he was doing and how much money he was making. And I think it was basically to be like, you were wrong about me. Now I'm super successful. And he told him that he was going to open up a drugstore with a business partner when he returned home from his trip, which he intended to do. When they got there, Charles went right to the casino and immediately lost all of their money in one night.
I can't.
He actually lost more than their money, and he became indebted to the casino. And it was so bad that he had to leave Chantal at the hotel as collateral. She was the collateral.
That's really bad.
This is a trip that like he's taking her on to be like, I love you.
That's like, so shitty. And now he's leaving her there as collateral. Oh
yeah,
my
God.
So
he had to fly back to Bombay and borrow money from the guy that he was going to open the drugstore with, who then no longer wanted to open the drugstore with him.
I wonder why.
Maybe this is why. And then go back to get Chantal. And like there's another story about him going to a casino with her, and she like wears this diamond necklace that was like a family heirloom, blah blah, and like he's doing so well, whatever, and then he loses all the money. He's like, I need your necklace. And she's like,
oh my God.
She's like, girl, like you should have left that day.
Yeah.
But anyway, she doesn't. So Chantal wrote letters to Felix asking him for help after this whole ordeal happened. But at this point, he was like, I knew I had to let Chantal suffer the consequences that he tried very hard to warn her about, and suffer she did. It was not long after that last gambling issue that Charles got himself arrested again. And this time it was for attempting to robbing a jewelry store at the Ashoka Hotel in Delhi, India. What he had done this time was he had seduced this flamenco dancer and held her hostage in her own hotel room for 3 days while he tried to drill a hole through the floor of her room into the jewelry shop. And for whatever reason, that didn't work. So when that didn't work, he then forced her to try to seduce the jewelry shop owner, who he then tricked and trapped and locked in the bathroom of the hotel.
Oh my God.
So then Charles stole a bunch of jewelry, $10,000 worth of jewelry, and flew to Tehran, which is a city in Iran.
Yeah.
And there he was apprehended. And Chantal found out about all of this by reading the newspaper. And so she saw this incident happen in the newspaper, and she's like, fuck. So she
She's like, wow, I really didn't see this coming.
Yeah. Well, I think she was like not shocked. She was like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah.
So she takes the baby and she finds Charles at the Willingdon Hospital in Delhi, where he was recovering from an operation. Because he was arrested, he then faked the symptoms of an appendicitis in order to be taken to the hospital. He did not have an appendicitis. He got a surgery for an appendicitis, I guess had his appendix removed.
Ooh, don't love that.
So that he could just like, you know, be at the hospital because he thought it would be easier to escape from the hospital than from a prison.
Okay.
And so, well,
I hate that he volunteered for a surgery though.
Yeah.
My nightmare.
That's what he did. Sounds horrible, but that's what he did.
Yeah.
And so he's there. He just recovered. He's starting to recover from the surgery. He's got like guards there, whatever. And so Chantal is there, and he like basically like implies to her and tells her like go like hang out with the guards or whatever. And they're like, ooh, a woman, like cool. And so while Chantal is there distracting the guards, so Charles, at one point they're like, okay, we need to cuff you or whatever. And so they're cuffing his leg. And what the book explains it is he puts his arm in too. And then once they leave, he like takes his arm out. So like the cuff is like really big. So he's able to slip out entirely and escapes from the hospital.
Wow.
And he didn't make it far. He's like,
I mean, he's crafty. He's
crafty AF. Okay. He's so crafty, but he's like fresh out of surgery. So he doesn't make it very far before he's caught.
Yeah, that's true. He had to have surgery. Like it's going to slow you down.
He should have like waited a few days.
Oh my God.
And so he's caught. And this time, dogs in the hall. And this time Chantal is jailed as well for aiding in his escape. And Chantal is like never been to prison before. And she goes to prison and she's Chantal. Like, she's super like weirded out because in prison, Charles, like everyone in prison thinks Charles is like the super cool guy. And like, he's really well known there. He's like
yeah, of course he's well known in prison.
And she's like, what
that's funny.
So she's able to get out on bail pretty quickly.
Okay.
And so she decided to send their daughter back to France to be with her parents. Good move, I think. Although she should have just gone too. She didn't because she's desperately in love with this man. In January of 1972, Charles was granted bail and he and Chantal fled to Kabul, which is in Afghanistan for anyone who doesn't know. Okay. He's definitely like they're not supposed to do that, but they do that. Charles and Chantal wanted to make it to Tehran because like I think Charles had some connections there and he's like, that's going to be a good location for us. They had left their hotel so they are in Kabul. They're staying in a hotel. And they stay there for a couple nights and they leave without paying.
Of course.
They rent a car. Their plan was to make it over the border in the car, but they were pulled over by the police who noticed that it was a rented car and told them that they were not supposed to have driven this far in a rented vehicle. I guess that was the rule for whatever reason. Charles is like, okay, I'll return it in the morning. And the police are like, yeah, you will. And we're going to go with you. And so Charles is like, okay. And they're like, don't worry, we'll find you. So that night, Charles is like, okay, we got to just get out of here at midnight and take off. They wanted to drive as close to the border as they could and then ditch the car and like walk over the border. That was the plan. So they do this.
That's the plan.
They start going and they at some point ditch the car, but it's like pure desert that they have to walk through. And it's really, really hot. And they're walking and it's far and it's hot. And Chantal's like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. This is fucked. And then out of nowhere, this car starts pulling up and they're like, oh, thank God. Like, we'll ask these people for water. It's the cops. They found them.
Oh, God.
And they arrested them. So once again, they're under arrest. Both of them are in prison. Charles faked another illness and was sent to the hospital, although he learned it was not
How is like so convincing at faking illnesses.
Well, this is where he's starting to get into like different drugs and what they do and how he can fake it. I forget what it was, but like he somehow got a needle and syringe. He pulled some of his own blood and then shoved it down his throat and made it look like he was vomiting blood. And he was like, this is way better than appendicitis because I don't have to get surgery. But
it's going to be a big no from me.
Yeah, but he was still able to go to the hospital. And
Okay.
this time so when he was at the hospital, he was like, oh, I'm having trouble sleeping. I need sleeping pills. So they'd given him sleeping pills that he just kept to himself. And then once he'd collected enough, he crushed them all up. And then he was like, oh, can I get some tea? And so then the guards brought him tea for everybody, including the guards. And he put the sleeping pills in the tea. All the guards fell asleep. He was
Come
able to
on.
just reach the key to the cuffs off one of the sleeping guards, uncuffed himself, got the fuck out of there, drove near so first he stops. He'd somehow saved some money. He had like $300 that he had
Okay.
hidden when he got arrested and like hidden in his outfit. Like this all sounds so unreal to me. I like don't believe it.
It's very elaborate. Yeah.
The people who wrote this book claim it's all real, so fair enough. Although a lot of this, they do say at the beginning, a lot of this stuff, like all the scenes in which nobody else could corroborate but Charles, it is him saying that. So take it with a grain of salt. I'll say that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Because, I mean,
they very clearly,
is this guy really going to be honest? Like
at the beginning of the book, they're like, we don't trust this man.
Yeah, so, good. But necessary disclaimer.
But like something like the guards being drugged, that could have been verified.
Right.
And I think they did spend a lot of time verifying certain events.
Which is great.
So what he did was he got out, he went to a market and he tried to buy some clothes from a vendor, and the vendor was like, he was like, I want to buy the clothes that you're wearing. And he's like, no, I'm only selling new clothes. And he's like, I have $5 American. And the guy was like, okay. And so he like wore this guy's like old clothes and a turban and whatever. He found some guys who he noticed were French speaking, and he asked them to like sneak him over the border into Pakistan. And they did. And then just over 2 weeks later, Charles was back in Paris.
Wow.
And that is where I'm going to end this part.
Okay.
I was telling you, I was going to try to get like everything in before like murdering started. But like, I think this is a good place to end it because there's like even more. And I think this will be a couple parts. And that's where we're going to take it for the day.
Wow.
So
it's already a lot.
That's a lot. And we see like, this is this is his childhood. This is how he became the person that he became. I think he takes it really far, but you'll see. And he's up to this point, I would say like he's a very impressive guy. He's
in a sense, yeah.
Not a good guy, but my God, he's like really snaky.
Yeah. All the escapes are pretty like unusual, right? Like not that many people can achieve that.
Yeah, escape. And I'm sure like nowadays, I think he would not have been able to do half the stuff that he did.
Yeah.
Like it can't be that like it used to be so much easier for passports. Like in the
right.
He's like lifting pictures off of passports and replacing them with his own.
Yeah.
Like, there's like places you could write things in passports. So that type of thing was, I think, a lot easier.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Still,
yeah.
It's still like crazy.
Mm-hmm. And just even having like the audacity to keep doing it.
Yeah, I think a huge part of it is like the confidence and like,
just following through with it.
I can just be here and like people will be
like,
yeah, he's supposed to be here. Yeah, it's an intense story and I'm excited about it.
I know I'm interested to hear the serial killer evolution.
Yeah. So that's where we'll end it. And I guess comment if you'd like, save it for the other parts, whatever you want. Reach out Instagram at Who's Knocking Podcast, Twitter at Who's Knocking Pod, hello at Who's Knocking Podcast.com is our email address.
Yep. Send us an email. Some people do, and we like it.
Yeah. Please feel free to give us like a rating or a comment or whatever, or subscribe to us on YouTube. We're living it up there on YouTube. And
it's true.
Yeah. Stay safe out there because you never know
who's knocking.
Bye-bye. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew Cook.